I used to think love could protect me from anything, that as long as two people believed in each other, the world couldn't touch them. When I met Ethan, he made me believe that. He wasn't just charming, he was magnetic, the kind of man who walked into a room and made everyone turn their head, and somehow, out of all the polished, perfect women around him, he chose me, a girl from a modest background, raised by a mother who worked double shifts just so I could have a chance at college. I didn't come from wealth or connections, but I came with heart. And at the beginning, that was enough for him. Our love story started simple. Coffee dates, long drives, laughter that echoed past midnight. Ethan said he admired my authenticity, how I didn't need designer clothes or fancy words to stand tall. Back then, I thought we were equals. He said I grounded him. I believed him. When we got married, I didn't realize I was stepping into his world, not ours. The grand mansion, the board meetings, the charity events, the private jets, all of it looked beautiful from the outside. But behind those glittering walls was a hierarchy of status and silent judgment. Every time I walked into a room full of his high society friends, I could feel their eyes trace me, not in admiration, but in evaluation. My skin tone, my accent, my simplicity. Everything was measured, compared, and silently mocked. Ethan always brushed it off. "You're imagining it," he'd say with that smooth, dismissive tone. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. Still, I tried. I learned how to hold a wine glass properly, how to make polite small talk about stocks and art collections, how to wear their version of class. I did all of it for him, for us. But with every compromise, I felt myself fading a little. The laughter that used to come so easily now came out cautious. The woman who once walked barefoot in the rain now hesitated to wrinkle a silk dress. Lately, Ethan had changed too. His affection turned into corrections. My words, my wardrobe, even the way I greeted people. He called it refinement. I called it erasure. The man who once told me I was perfect as I was now looked at me like a project that needed polishing. Then came the charity gala, his biggest event of the year. It was supposed to be our night, a celebration of success and partnership, but I could feel his distance growing every day leading up to it. His assistant whispered more, his phone stayed locked, and his mother visited more often, always with that cold smile that never reached her eyes. Something was coming. I didn't know what, but the air around me was changing, heavy, charged, waiting to snap. I remember standing by our bedroom window that night, looking out at the city lights. They used to make me feel small in a good way, like part of something bigger, but that night they felt cold, distant, like they knew something I didn't. I wrapped my arms around myself and whispered, "Whatever's coming, I'll survive it." I didn't know it then, but that was the night before everything changed. The calm before the storm that would expose who Ethan truly was and who I was meant to become. The morning of the gala announcement still burns in my memory. I remember walking into the living room, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee, ready to tell Ethan that I'd found the perfect gown, something elegant but simple, the kind of beauty that doesn't shout but whispers confidence. He didn't even look up from his phone. When he finally did, the look on his face wasn't the one I fell in love with. It was cold, calculating. "You don't need to worry about the gala," he said flatly. "You're not attending this year." At first, I laughed, thinking he was joking, but his expression didn't change. My smile faded. "What do you mean I'm not attending?" "It's your company's event. Our event." He sighed like I was exhausting him. "It's not personal," he said. "It's just, you don't exactly fit in with that crowd. It's going to be a very high-profile night. Investors, press, politicians, people who expect a certain level of class." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I asked quietly, "And what exactly am I lacking?" He didn't answer right away. He just looked at me like he was studying a stranger. "You're too simple," he finally said. "You don't understand how these circles work. You talk too honestly. You don't carry yourself like them." I felt the sting like a slap. The man who once said he loved me because I was real was now ashamed of that very thing. I wanted to scream, to remind him how many late nights I spent editing his proposals, how I helped him draft his first pitch, how I believed in him before anyone else did. But the words stayed trapped behind my teeth. Later that day, his mother came by, all pearls and perfume. She sat on the couch, smiling politely while twisting the knife a little deeper. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "you should understand, these events are for people who know how to represent the family image. Don't take it personally." Her words dripped with poison masked as pity. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, staring at the reflection of a woman trying to recognize herself. I wasn't angry yet, just numb. I'd traded my independence, my career, and my voice for a man who now thought I was beneath him. The silence in our mansion was deafening. I realized something crucial in that moment. Respect isn't lost all at once. It fades, conversation by conversation, insult by insult, until one day you look up and realize you're invisible to the person you loved most. And I swore to myself right then I might be invisible to him now, but not for long. The night after he told me I wasn't classy enough, I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling humiliation burn in my chest like fire. Every word he said replayed over and over. Too simple, not enough, not one of them. The old me would have cried herself empty, but something in me shifted that night. Maybe it was anger, maybe it was pride, or maybe it was the quiet realization that I had spent too long trying to be worthy of someone who had already stopped seeing my worth. By morning, I wasn't broken anymore. I was awake. I poured myself a cup of coffee, opened my laptop, and went back to something I hadn't touched in years. My old business plan. Before Ethan, I had built a small consultancy helping women launch startups. I paused it after we married, believing my role was to support his empire. But that morning, I reactivated everything. My website, my contacts, my purpose. Within hours, old clients were emailing me, saying they'd been waiting for me to come back. Over the next few days, I worked silently. Ethan thought I was sulking. In truth, I was rebuilding. I met with my best friend Lila, a designer I once helped fund. When I told her what happened, she didn't pity me. She smiled slowly and said, "Then let's make them choke on their own standards." We spent hours designing something breathtaking, elegant, commanding, and powerful. A gown that didn't scream wealth but radiated presence. While Ethan prepared for his perfect gala, I prepared my own moves. I reached out to people he underestimated, investors, philanthropists, and CEOs he thought were loyal only to him. What he didn't know was that I had quietly advised many of them behind the scenes. I was the one who helped them make decisions that saved millions. They respected me, even if he didn't. And when one of them mentioned the gala's biggest donation sponsor, an anonymous benefactor funding a new women's initiative, I smiled, because that sponsor was me. That was the moment I knew my silence had power. I didn't need to shout, argue, or beg to be seen. I only needed to remember who I was before he tried to define me. So when the night of the gala arrived, I didn't go as someone's wife. I went as the woman who built her own name, and I was ready to make them all remember it. The night of the gala felt like walking into the heart of every memory he tried to bury me under. I remember standing outside the grand ballroom, the sound of violins floating through the air, laughter echoing from people who had once looked through me like I was invisible. My hands trembled for a second, not from fear, but from power. I wasn't the same woman who cried in silence anymore. I was the woman who came to reclaim her place, not beside him, but above him. When I stepped through the doors, the entire room shifted. Conversations faltered. Glasses froze mid-air, eyes turned. I could feel their confusion ripple like a wave. The same people who once whispered that I wasn't elegant enough now couldn't look away. My black gown flowed like liquid silk, the diamond earrings catching the light as if to announce that I had arrived. Every step I took was deliberate, calm, controlled, dangerous in its quietness. Ethan was standing near the stage, smiling for photographers, his hand around the waist of his new classy companion, a model whose beauty was as rehearsed as her laugh. When he saw me, his face drained of color. He blinked, once, twice, as if trying to confirm that I was real. The whispers around him grew louder. The reporters who ignored me in the past suddenly rushed forward. "Oh my God, that's his wife!" someone whispered. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I walked past him, brushing lightly against his shoulder, and smiled just enough for the cameras to catch. He turned, his voice low but trembling. "What are you doing here?" "Attending a gala," I said smoothly. "The one I helped fund." His confusion was priceless. The host on stage tapped the microphone, announcing that it was time to thank the evening's anonymous donor, the one who had funded the entire $50 million charity initiative. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "please welcome the woman whose generosity made tonight possible, Mrs. Evelyn Carter." Gasps filled the air as spotlights turned toward me. Ethan froze. His date stepped back awkwardly. His mother's jaw tightened. Cameras flashed so fast it felt like lightning. I walked up to the stage, my heels echoing against marble floors, and took the microphone. "Good evening," I began, voice calm but steady. When I was told that this gala represented grace, class, and compassion, I knew I wanted to be part of it, not for appearances, but for purpose. The crowd leaned in. "True class," I continued, "isn't about what you wear or how you speak. It's about how you treat people when no one's watching." The applause was thunderous. I looked down at Ethan, pale, silent, trapped in the image he'd built. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt peace. Because in that moment, I had become everything he said I wasn't, not to prove him wrong, but to prove myself right. I handed the microphone back, turned to the audience with a serene smile, and walked off the stage, leaving him standing there, surrounded by flashes, lies, and the wreckage of his own arrogance. That was the night I stopped being the woman he rejected, and became the woman no one could forget. The morning after the gala, my name was everywhere. Headlines, interviews, trending hashtags. The secret philanthropist who stunned the elite. Billionaire's wife outshines husband at charity gala. Reporters called me elegant, graceful, powerful. The same media that once treated me like a background accessory now wanted my story. I didn't gloat, but I won't lie. It felt good. Not because I wanted fame, but because the truth had finally stepped into the light. Ethan didn't take it well. His calls came one after another, at first soft, then frantic. Then angry. "You humiliated me," he said. "Do you have any idea what this looks like?" I replied quietly, "Yes." Honest. He didn't know that while I was rebuilding myself, I was also preparing for this day. I had kept records, his secret transfers, his fake charity deductions, the way he used my name on paperwork without my consent. I had warned him before to separate his ego from his business. He didn't listen. So when I met the board that Monday morning, I wasn't just the wife he'd dismissed, I was the majority shareholder. The meeting room went silent when I walked in. I laid out the evidence calmly, no anger, no shouting, just facts. "This," I said, pointing to the projected numbers, "is what happens when arrogance blinds leadership." The board members shifted uncomfortably. Ethan tried to interrupt, but the chairman stopped him. For the first time, I had the floor. By the end of that meeting, the decision was unanimous. Ethan was removed as CEO. His accounts were frozen pending investigation. His name, once printed in gold, was now whispered with shame. He walked out of that building with his tie undone, surrounded by cameras flashing mercilessly. I didn't smile, not once. Because revenge wasn't supposed to make me smaller, it was meant to free me. I stood on the steps, watching him fade into the chaos he created, and whispered to myself, "This is what dignity looks like." Later that week, I received hundreds of messages from women who had seen the story, women who'd been silenced, overlooked, or told they weren't enough, And that's when I knew. This wasn't about bringing him down anymore. It was about standing tall for every woman who'd ever been told she didn't belong in the room she built. When the dust finally settled, silence became my best friend. For the first time in years, my days weren't filled with tension, correction, or pretending to be someone I wasn't. I woke up to peace. Not perfection, just peace. The kind that comes when you stop chasing validation and start remembering your own worth. Ethan tried to reach out a few times, but I never answered. There was nothing left to say. His empire crumbled, his so-called friends vanished, and the woman he paraded at the gala disappeared the moment the cameras stopped flashing. Meanwhile, I was building something new, not out of revenge, but from rebirth. I started a foundation for women like me. Women who gave everything to someone who made them feel like nothing. We offered scholarships, mentorships, and most importantly, hope. I poured my heart into that work, and every story I heard reminded me how universal pain can be, and how powerful healing truly is. Sometimes people ask if I regret what happened. I don't. I regret believing for so long that love means shrinking yourself for someone else's comfort. I regret silencing my voice just to make someone else feel big. But I don't regret walking away. Because that walk, that quiet final step, was the loudest declaration of self-respect I've ever made. And now, when I pass by the mirror, I see her, the woman he said wasn't classy enough, the woman he tried to erase. She's still here, stronger, wiser, and unshakably sure of who she is. I didn't ruin him. I simply stopped saving him. And that, right there, was the most beautiful ending I could have ever written for myself. I was 6 months pregnant when my billionaire husband threw me out in the rain like trash. His mistress smiled from our bedroom window. They thought I was broken. They thought I had nothing. But what they didn't know, I had something worth more than all his money combined. Before I tell you how I made them both regret everything, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't believe where this story goes, trust me. You'll want to stick around until the end because the revenge? Chef's kiss. Now let me take you back to where it all started. My name is Denise Thompson, and 5 years ago I was a middle school English teacher in Philadelphia. I loved my job. Those kids kept me grounded, kept me real. I met Christopher Wallace at a charity book drive I organized at my school. He walked in wearing a casual sweater and jeans, carrying boxes of books like it was nothing. I had no idea he was the Christopher Wallace, the tech entrepreneur who'd just sold his startup for millions. He was charming, funny, and when he asked me to dinner, I said yes, without hesitation. 6 months later, he proposed at my school, right in front of my students. They went wild. It was perfect. We got married that summer in a beautiful ceremony, and I thought I was living a fairy tale. Then his company went public, and overnight, Christopher became a billionaire. Our lives changed completely. We moved into a mansion, had staff, got invited to galas and fancy parties. I kept teaching, though. That was my condition. I needed to stay connected to who I was. Christopher said he loved that about me. He said I kept him humble. For the first 2 years, we were happy. Really happy. Then I got pregnant, and everything seemed even more perfect. We painted the nursery together, argued over baby names, dreamed about our future. The first 5 months of my pregnancy were the best months of my life. I should have known it was too good to last. That's when Lauren Mitchell entered our lives. Christopher hired her as an executive consultant for his company. She was blonde, polished, came from old money, went to all the right schools. At first, I didn't think much of it. Christopher had lots of employees. But then she started showing up everywhere. Family dinners, weekend trips. She'd laugh at his jokes just a little too loud, touch his arm just a little too long. When I mentioned it to Christopher, he looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "You're being insecure," he said. "Lauren's helping me expand the business." That's it. He made me feel crazy for even bringing it up. The late nights started, missed doctor's appointments. He'd come home smelling like perfume that wasn't mine, and when I'd ask about it, he'd accuse me of being paranoid. "It's the pregnancy hormones," he'd say. "You're not thinking clearly. That's what gaslighting does to you. It makes you question everything you know to be true." His mother Helen didn't help. She'd make these little comments about how I needed to keep myself up, even though I was 6 months pregnant. She'd suggest that maybe I was being too demanding of Christopher's time, that successful men need space to work. I felt so alone. My best friend Trina kept telling me to trust my gut, but I kept pushing those feelings down. I loved him. I wanted to believe him. Then one Tuesday afternoon, I found a diamond earring in our bed, not mine. I held that earring in my hand for 20 minutes, just staring at it. When Christopher came home, I showed it to him calmly. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just asked him to explain. And you know what he did? He didn't even deny it. He looked relieved, like he'd been waiting for this moment. "I never should have married you, Denise," he said, cold as ice. "You don't fit in my world." "You never did." Before I could respond, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Lauren appeared at the top, wearing my robe. My robe. She had this smirk on her face like she'd won some prize. Turns out she'd been staying at our house the whole week I was in Atlanta taking care of my sick mother. They'd been playing house in my home while I was gone. "I want a divorce," Christopher said flatly, "and I need you out, tonight." I looked at this man, the father of my unborn child, and I didn't recognize him. Outside, rain was pouring down. I was 6 months pregnant, and he wanted me gone immediately. I begged him, not for our marriage, that was dead, but for our baby, for some decency, some time to figure things out. "That baby doesn't change anything," he said, and those words cut deeper than any knife could. "Lauren's my future now. You're my past." His mother stood in the hallway watching this entire scene unfold. She didn't say a word, didn't defend me, didn't tell her son he was being cruel. She just watched as security escorted me out with one suitcase for 3 years of marriage. I stood in the rain, water soaking through my clothes, my hand on my belly, watching Lauren wave at me from my bedroom window. That image is burned into my brain forever. I felt so small, so worthless, so completely destroyed. Trina picked me up and took me to her tiny apartment. I cried for 3 days straight. I couldn't eat, could barely breathe. The pain wasn't just emotional, it was physical. My chest hurt, my whole body hurt. Christopher's lawyers sent divorce papers within a week. He was offering minimal child support and nothing else. I was so broken, so defeated, that I just signed everything. I gave up rights to marital assets, to the house, to everything. I just wanted it to be over. Meanwhile, Christopher and Lauren went public with their relationship on social media. The comments were vicious. People called me a gold digger who got what I deserved. They said he'd upgraded, that I'd been punching above my weight anyway. Every comment was another punch to the gut. I moved through those next weeks like a zombie. Teaching was the only thing that kept me going. My students noticed I was sad. They started leaving little notes on my desk. "Lee, you're the best teacher ever. Hope you feel better, Ms. Thompson." One of my students, Diamond, whose mother had abandoned her, stayed after class one day. She looked at me with these wise eyes and said, "You're stronger than you think, Ms. Thompson." I can tell. That 14-year-old girl gave me more hope than any adult had. One night, unpacking that single suitcase for probably the 10th time, I found something strange. A flash drive tucked into the torn lining. I didn't remember packing it, didn't even remember owning it. Curiosity got the best of me, so I plugged it into Trina's laptop. What I found changed everything: financial documents, corporate records, emails. Someone had sent me Christopher's entire digital paper trail months ago from an anonymous email account. I'd never even opened the email because I trusted my husband. As I started reading, my hands began to shake. Tax evasion, fraud, embezzlement. But what really caught my attention was a patent filing for something called Wallace Tech Innovation, the algorithm that made Christopher his billions. The original inventor listed was Gerald Murphy, deceased. The patent was filed just 3 weeks after Gerald died in a car accident. I kept digging through the files, and the story became clear. Christopher hadn't invented anything. He'd stolen everything from his former business partner and then stolen the patent after Gerald died. I couldn't sleep that night. I read every single document, found emails where Christopher discussed handling the Gerald problem, found financial transfers to offshore accounts, found communications about making sure Gerald's widow couldn't afford to fight back legally. Gerald Murphy's widow was named Beverly. She was a black woman who'd been left with nothing while Christopher built an empire on her dead husband's genius. I found Beverly's contact information in some old emails and reached out. We met at a coffee shop 3 days later. She was working 2 jobs, looked exhausted, and when I told her what I'd found, she started crying right there in public. Gerald trusted Christopher like a brother, she told me. They started that company together in our garage. After Gerald died, Christopher said he'd take care of us. Instead, he took everything and left us with nothing. I tried to fight, but his lawyers buried me in paperwork I couldn't afford to respond to. Beverly showed me Gerald's original sketches and patent applications. Everything matched what Christopher later claimed as his own invention. We had him, but I needed more evidence and I needed professionals to help me. I used part of my teaching salary to consult with Kevin Banks, a lawyer friend from college. When Kevin saw what I had, his eyes went wide. "Denise, this isn't just divorce court territory, this is federal crime territory. This could bring down his entire empire. We needed more evidence, though. Hard copies, bank statements, more communications, and I knew exactly where to find them. Christopher's home office. I still had keys to the house, and security had never changed the codes. It was risky, especially 7 months pregnant, but I had to do it. I planned it carefully. Christopher and Lauren were attending a charity gala on a Saturday night. I knew they'd be gone for hours. At 2 in the morning, I let myself into my former home. Walking through those halls felt surreal. Everything looked the same, but felt completely different. My hands shook as I made my way to Christopher's office. I downloaded everything I could find onto multiple flash drives: bank statements, emails, contracts, offshore account information. The evidence was damning. He hadn't just stolen from Gerald. He'd been defrauding investors, evading taxes, running shell corporations. This man was a criminal. I heard a car door slam and my heart stopped. They were home early. I grabbed the flash drives and hid in the office closet, 7 months pregnant, trying not to breathe too loud. Christopher and Lauren came into the office, arguing about money. "When are you making me co-owner like you promised?" Lauren demanded. Christopher laughed coldly. "After the divorce is final, sweetheart? That prenup with Denise was ironclad, but I need to make sure everything's protected first." So Lauren was just another pawn in his game. Even she didn't know who she was really dealing with. They left the room, and I escaped through the back door. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might go into labor right there, but I'd done it. I had everything I needed. Kevin brought in Monique Jackson, a prosecutor known for taking down white-collar criminals. When Monique saw the evidence, she smiled like a shark. "We've got him," she said simply. We brought Beverly in officially. Federal investigators got involved, the SEC, the IRS, everyone. The case built for weeks while I stayed quiet and played the role of the pathetic, abandoned wife publicly. Then I went into labor. 8 hours of it, and Christopher didn't show up. He sent a text that just said, "Lawyer will contact you about custody arrangements." Trina was in the delivery room holding my hand, and my mother flew in from Atlanta. When they placed my daughter on my chest, I named her Gabriel. It means, "God is my strength." I looked at her tiny face and made a promise. No one would ever make her feel small. No one would ever treat her the way her father treated me. I used my maternity leave to finalize everything. Kevin connected me with Angela Williams, an investigative journalist who'd been tracking Christopher's suspicious business dealings for years. "I always knew something was off about his rise," she told me. "We planned to release the story simultaneously with the federal charges, create maximum impact." I recorded a video testimony explaining everything. We built an airtight case that Christopher's expensive lawyers couldn't wiggle out of. 3 months after Gabrielle was born, Angela's article dropped. "The Billionaire Built on Lies: How Christopher Wallace Stole an Empire." It went viral within hours. Every major news outlet picked it up. The article detailed everything: the stolen patents, the fraud, the tax evasion, Gerald's story, Beverly's suffering. Federal warrants were issued that same day. I'll never forget watching the news footage of FBI agents raiding Christopher's office. Lauren was there when it happened. They questioned her too, though she wasn't charged with anything. She just didn't know what her boyfriend really was. Christopher's assets were frozen immediately. His company's stock crashed 87% in a single day. The board of directors voted to remove him as CEO. Criminal charges were filed for fraud, tax evasion, and intellectual property theft. Everything he'd built came crashing down in 72 hours. It was beautiful. Then Christopher showed up at Trina's apartment. It was midnight, and he was banging on the door like a madman. I answered with Gabrielle on my hip. I barely recognized him. He was unshaven, wearing wrinkled clothes, eyes wild and desperate. "You did this," he said, his voice breaking. "You destroyed me. You ruined everything. I looked at this man who'd thrown me out in the rain, who'd abandoned his child, who'd made me feel worthless, and I felt nothing but peace." "No, Christopher," I said calmly. "You ruined yourself. You built your entire life on lies and theft. I just made sure you couldn't ruin anyone else." He started crying right there on the doorstep, actually crying. "I loved you, Denise. I lost everything. The audacity of this man." "You threw away everything," I corrected him. "There's a difference. You chose Lauren. You chose greed. You chose to steal from a dead man's family. Those were your choices. Now you get to live with the consequences." I closed the door in his face. Christopher was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. He was ordered to pay $340 million in restitution to Gerald's estate, to defrauded investors, and to the government. Beverly finally got justice for Gerald. She used her compensation to open a scholarship fund in his name for aspiring Black inventors and engineers. Lauren released a statement saying she'd been deceived and manipulated, which made me laugh. She knew exactly what she was doing. Helen Wallace lost her precious social standing overnight. She still refuses to acknowledge any wrongdoing, still insists her son was framed. As for me, I used my portion of the recovered assets to start a nonprofit called Second Chances Foundation. We help women leaving bad marriages, provide legal assistance, temporary housing, job training, childcare. Everything I wish I'd had during those dark days. I went back to teaching and eventually became principal of my school. Gabrielle is 3 years old now, smart as a whip, and surrounded by love. She'll never know a father who didn't want her, but she'll know a mother who'd burn the world down to protect her. I'm even dating again, taking it slow, but I'm open to love. Real love this time. The kind built on respect and honesty. I found happiness in the life I rebuilt from ashes. And you know what I learned through all of this? Revenge isn't about destruction. It's about justice. It's about standing up when they think you'll stay down. Christopher didn't throw me out because I wasn't good enough. He threw me out because he was never good enough for me. He was a fraud in every sense of the word, and deep down he knew I deserved better. That baby girl he abandoned? She's got a mother who's a warrior, who turned her pain into purpose, who fought back when the world expected her to disappear quietly. That's the greatest revenge of all. Not making them hurt, making them watch you thrive. If this story inspired you, gave you chills, or made you believe in karma, smash that like button. Drop a comment telling me what you would have done in my situation. And subscribe because I've got more stories that'll remind you they might knock you down. But your comeback? That's your story to write. Now go check out the next video on your screen. You're gonna love it. Until next time, remember, never let anyone dim your light. They said I wasn't good enough because I gave him daughters. My billionaire husband dumped me like trash for his pregnant mistress because I only gave him daughters. He married her 3 months later, flaunting his new son everywhere. But he forgot one thing. I knew his world better than anyone, and I used that knowledge to take everything he loved, piece by piece. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because this isn't just a story about karma. This is about a woman who fought back and won. By the end of this, you'll understand why the best revenge isn't loud or messy. It's strategic, legal, and completely devastating. Now let me take you back to where it all started. My name is Gabrielle, and 11 years ago, I married a man I thought was my soulmate. Trevor was ambitious, charming, and building a real estate development company from the ground up. I was a corporate lawyer, young and hungry, ready to take on the world. When we met at a business conference, it felt like magic. We got married within a year, and I thought I had found my forever. Here's what nobody tells you about marrying an ambitious man. Sometimes you become a supporting character in his story. I gave up my law career when our first daughter Nia was born. Trevor said it made sense. Someone needed to be home, and his business was taking off. Then Kennedy came along 2 years later, and suddenly I was a full-time mother. But I didn't mind. I loved my girls more than anything in this world. What I didn't realize was that I was still working. I was hosting dinners for investors, schmoozing with city council members at charity events, building relationships with everyone who mattered in Trevor's business world. I was the charming wife who made people feel comfortable, who remembered their children's names, who sent thoughtful gifts. While Trevor closed deals, I opened doors. His business partners loved me. Their wives trusted me. I was the secret weapon he didn't even appreciate. For years, everything seemed perfect. We had money, status, beautiful daughters, a mansion that looked like something out of a magazine. But after Kennedy was born, something shifted. Trevor's mother, Mrs. Helen, started making comments. Little digs about how the family name needed a male heir. How disappointing it was that we only had girls. At first I laughed it off. This is the 21st century, right? Who cares about having sons versus daughters? But Trevor cared. I started noticing how he'd get quiet when his business partners talked about their sons. How he'd make excuses to skip the girls' dance recitals but never missed a golf game. How he started working later and later, coming home after the girls were asleep. I tried everything to reconnect with him. I planned date nights, I tried to talk. I even suggested marriage counseling. He just brushed me off, said I was being dramatic, that he was building an empire and I needed to be patient. Then came the day that destroyed everything. I found an ultrasound picture in his car. At first, I thought maybe it was from one of our friends, something he was holding for someone. But then I saw the date. It was recent, and the name on it wasn't anyone I knew. Vanessa Thompson, his assistant, the 27-year-old woman who had been working for him for 2 years. I confronted him that night after I put the girls to bed. I'll never forget the look on his face. Not guilt, not shame, but relief. Like he was glad he didn't have to hide anymore. He told me Vanessa was 5 months pregnant with his son. His son. He said it like he had won the lottery. I asked him how long this had been going on, and he looked me dead in the eye and said it didn't matter anymore because she was giving him what I couldn't. A male heir. I felt like the floor had opened up beneath me. This man I had loved, supported, built a life with for over a decade was throwing me away like I was defective, like our daughters weren't enough, like I wasn't enough. He filed for divorce the next week. His lawyer was aggressive, trying to make me look unstable, like I was a gold digger who didn't deserve much. I was so broken, so devastated, that I just signed the papers. I took the settlement money, kept the house we lived in, and let him have almost everything else. I just wanted it to be over. 3 months later, Trevor married Vanessa in this huge ceremony that was all over social media. And when baby Trevor Jr. was born, you would have thought the second coming had arrived. Magazine covers, social media posts, parties where Mrs. Helen acted like she had finally been blessed with a real grandchild. My daughters would come home from visits crying because Grandma barely acknowledged them, too busy fawning over the baby boy. Trevor canceled plans with them constantly, always having some excuse about the baby needing him. I spent 6 months in the darkest depression of my life. I cried every night after putting my girls to bed. I felt worthless, replaced, forgotten. But one day, I watched my daughter Nia come home from her father's house, and she said something that changed everything. She asked me, "Mommy, why doesn't Daddy love us anymore? Is it because we're girls?" My 9-year-old baby girl thought she wasn't good enough because of her gender. That's when something inside me snapped, not in an angry way, but in a clarifying way. I stopped crying. I looked in the mirror and remembered who I was before I became Trevor's wife. I was Gabrielle Thompson, corporate lawyer, the woman who graduated top of her class, who could negotiate million-dollar deals before I turned 30. I had let that woman disappear, but she was still in there. I made a decision that day. I was going to rebuild my law license, restart my career, and I was going to use every single thing I knew about Trevor's world to rise while he fell. Not through anything illegal or crazy, just through being better, smarter, and more strategic than he ever gave me credit for. I reconnected with my old law firm, and they welcomed me back with open arms. Turns out, I had a reputation as one of the sharpest corporate lawyers before I left. I started small, taking cases, rebuilding my skills. Then I specialized in exactly what Trevor did, real estate development law. I started representing developers and investors, learning every angle, every strategy. And here's where my revenge really began. See, I knew Trevor's business inside and out. I knew his patterns, his strategies, how he thought, what moves he made. For years I had sat at dinner tables listening to him plan deals. I knew which properties he targeted, what kind of investors he courted, even his timeline for projects, and now I was using all that knowledge to help his competitors. I didn't do anything illegal, I didn't steal files or break confidentiality, I simply advised other developers on how to be competitive in the market. If I knew Trevor liked to lowball initial offers and come back strong, I told my clients to go in with their best offer first. If I knew he relied on certain investors, I made sure my clients built relationships with different funding sources. Within 6 months, Trevor lost 3 major development deals. Each one cost him millions. And he had no idea I was the one advising the people who beat him. But I wasn't just focused on business. I remembered all those society connections I had built over the years, those charity events I had organized, those friendships with influential women in our city. I started hosting events again, elegant dinners and fundraisers. I invited everyone who mattered, and when they asked about my divorce, I didn't badmouth Trevor. I didn't have to. I just told the truth with grace and dignity. I talked about how painful it was to be replaced, how my daughters struggled with feeling less than their half-brother, how a man who could abandon his family so easily made me question everything. Word spread fast in those circles. Suddenly, Vanessa found herself excluded from events. Invitations stopped coming. The society women who once welcomed her now whispered when she walked by. Trevor's mother noticed their social standing dropping, and she was furious. She had traded me, the dignified, connected wife, for a younger woman nobody respected. Trevor's business relationships started suffering because in high society, how you treat people matters. And people remembered how he treated me. Then I made my biggest move. Trevor's company was planning this massive mixed-use development downtown, condos, retail, offices, the works. It was supposed to be his crowning achievement. He needed city council approval for zoning changes. Normally, this would have been easy for him because of all the relationships we, and let me emphasize we, had built over the years. But I had maintained those relationships too. I didn't ask anyone to vote against Trevor's project. I didn't have to. I simply made sure that community concerns were heard. Environmental impact studies, traffic pattern analysis, affordable housing requirements, all legitimate issues that needed addressing. I volunteered my legal expertise to community groups who had questions. Every meeting got delayed, every approval got pushed back. The project that should have taken 6 months to get approved was stuck in bureaucratic limbo for over a year and a half. Do you know what happens to a real estate development when it gets delayed that long? Costs multiply. Investors get nervous. Some pull out entirely. Trevor was hemorrhaging money, paying carrying costs on property that wasn't generating revenue. His reputation as the Golden Touch developer started crumbling. People whispered that maybe he had just been lucky before. Maybe his success had more to do with his team, or his ex-wife, than his own brilliance. Meanwhile, my career was soaring. I made partner at my law firm. I was representing major clients, handling complex negotiations, earning excellent money. I bought a beautiful home for me and my daughters. Not as big as the mansion, but filled with love and laughter and stability. My girls were thriving. They had a mother who was present, strong, and showed them that a woman's worth has nothing to do with what men think of her. And Trevor? His perfect new life was falling apart. Vanessa had married him for money and status, and as both started disappearing, so did her patience. She demanded expensive things constantly: jewelry, cars, designer clothes, as if material goods could fill whatever was empty inside her. Trevor Jr. needed expensive therapy for developmental delays, and while Trevor loved his son, the financial pressure was crushing. He was paying child support for 2 households, funding his mother's medical care after she had a stroke, and watching his business empire crumble deal by deal. The girls started telling me things during our time together: how Daddy and Vanessa fought constantly, how Mrs. Helen blamed Vanessa for everything going wrong, as if she had cursed the family, how Trevor looked exhausted all the time, stressed and angry. Kennedy, my sweet 7-year-old, said something that broke my heart and filled me with satisfaction at the same time. She said, "Daddy seems sad now, but you seem happy, Mommy." She was right. I was happy. Not because Trevor was suffering. I had loved him once, and there was no joy in watching anyone's pain. But I was happy because I had reclaimed myself. I had rebuilt my life, my career, my sense of worth. I had shown my daughters that a woman doesn't need a man to validate her existence, that we are enough, exactly as we are. Then came the custody modification hearing. Nia and Kennedy, now older and braver, told the judge how they felt neglected by their father, how he canceled plans constantly, how they felt like second-class children compared to their half-brother. The judge listened carefully and modified the custody agreement. Trevor got less time with the girls, and his child support payments increased, based on his supposed billionaire status, even though his actual liquid income was dropping fast. Everything I had carefully, legally, strategically put in motion was coming together. Trevor's business was struggling, his marriage was miserable, his relationship with his daughters was damaged, his social standing was gone, and through it all I had never broken a single law. I had never done anything unethical. I had simply stopped protecting him and started using my own intelligence and connections to build my own success. About 3 years after our divorce, I started seeing Trevor at business events. We moved in overlapping professional circles now that I was back in corporate law. He would stare at me from across the room, watching me laugh with clients, network with confidence, command respect. I could see the realization dawning in his eyes. I had been the foundation of his success all along. The relationships, the social connections, the grace under pressure, the strategic thinking, so much of what made him successful had been built on my shoulders. He started calling me. First, it was about the girls. Reasonable co-parenting questions that could have been answered over email. Then the calls got longer. He wanted to talk about the old days, remember good times. He asked about my career, my life, as if he suddenly cared. I kept my responses polite but distant. I had moved on, and he was no longer the center of my universe. Then one evening, he showed up at my house. I was getting ready for a charity gala when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Trevor standing there, and he looked like a shadow of the man I had married. The confidence was gone. The arrogance had been replaced with something that looked like desperation. He asked if we could talk. I stepped outside, not wanting to invite him into the home I had built without him. And then, right there in my driveway, this man who had thrown me away like garbage 3 years earlier got down on his knees. Tears were streaming down his face as he looked up at me and said he had made the biggest mistake of his life. He told me that Vanessa never loved him the way I did, that his mother had poisoned his mind with outdated ideas about legacy and heirs, that his son, while he loved him, came into a broken home filled with resentment and financial stress, that every business deal he lost, every door that closed, every relationship that soured. He was starting to realize I had been behind it all, not in an illegal way, but in a way that showed him exactly how much of his success had depended on me. He begged me to help him, to advise him again, to consider giving him another chance. He said we were a team, that he was nothing without me, that he would do anything if I would just forgive him and help him rebuild. I looked down at this man on his knees, and I felt something I didn't expect. Peace. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity, just peace. I helped him stand up, looked him directly in the eyes, and I spoke the truth that had been building in me for 3 years. I told him that he didn't just leave me. He taught our daughters that their worth depends on their gender, that he chose a womb over a partnership, a fantasy over reality. I told him I wasn't there to save him, that I wasn't his backup plan, and I wasn't the safety net he could fall into when his choices destroyed him. Everything he was losing, he did to himself. His own arrogance, his own weakness, his own inability to value what was real. Then I told him something that made his face go pale. I admitted that, yes, every business loss he suffered was partly because of me. Every deal he lost, I had advised the winner. Every investor who pulled back, I had planted seeds of doubt. Every social door that closed, I had simply told the truth about what he did to his family. But here's what made it beautiful. I hadn't broken a single law. I hadn't done anything unethical. I had simply stopped protecting him and started competing against him. And I was better at the game than he ever was. His face crumpled as he realized the full scope of what had happened. I hadn't just moved on. I had strategically dismantled everything he took from me and built something better for myself. The woman he threw away had become his most formidable opponent, and he never saw it coming because he had never truly seen me at all. I told him that his relationship with our daughters was his responsibility to repair, that I would never stop him from being their father, but I would also never let them forget that they are valuable and loved exactly as they are. I wished him well with his son, with his life, with whatever he chose to do next. And then I walked back into my house and closed the door. Through the window, I watched him sit in his car for almost 20 minutes before driving away. And I felt nothing but gratitude that I had found my strength again, that I had shown my daughters what real power looks like, that I had proven to myself that my worth was never dependent on his validation. If this story touched you, hit that like button right now. Subscribe and turn on those notifications, because I share real stories about women who don't just survive, they rise. Drop a comment telling me what you would have done in my position. Would you have taken him back? Would you have gone even further? I read every single comment. Remember this: the best revenge isn't loud or messy. It's strategic, legal, and completely devastating. Your power is in your intelligence, your resilience, and your refusal to let anyone define your worth. When someone throws you away, don't just pick up the pieces, build a whole new masterpiece they could never imagine. You are enough, exactly as you are. I'll see you in the next one. Stay blessed, stay smart, and never let anyone dim your light.